Let us examine the issue for ourselves. If you wrote a book or designed something, wouldn't you want the original to be preserved? What would be the good of a well-written book if every time it was printed some kind of error was introduced? Pretty soon the book would be useless, or if by some chance it was still readable, the work would no longer be recognizable as your own. Can mutations, copying mistakes, actually lead to increased information and functionality? Given enough time, can a so-called simple cell become a mammal or a fish or a man? And by the way, if you think about it, any life that can reproduce itself is complex. There is no such thing as a simple life form. The idea of random mutations was tried on fruit flies since they breed quickly and you can observe many generations. After decades of damaging the genes with radiation, no improvements were observed. Non-functioning wings, legs growing where antennas should be, always a loss of function and original information, successfully proving that mutations are harmful and never beneficial. These successful animals are all from the original dog kind. The code has operated to preserve the kind, whilst natural selection works to encourage the existing traits best suited to the environment. Artificial selection has been used to produce domestic dogs, bred for a certain traits which are desirable to humans, but they have lost information. This has happened rapidly since the 1600s, and these artificially bred dogs would not be able to compete with the superior wild dogs, which still have more of the original information. You can really go to town on the information loss thing. Some people breed dogs to be ugly. Rascal here is a former world champion, and if I'm any judge, surely this dog has the makings of a future champion. Is this albino peacock evolving upwards? His loss of colour is not going to make him popular with the ladies, and he is unlikely to pass on his information loss to future generations. But if peacocks could survive in the Arctic, he might do very well. Thanks to his novelty value, this five-legged octopus has a secure home at Anglesey Sea Zoo, but missing 3 legs is not an improvement and would normally hamper his survival. It's a miracle, cries National Geographic magazine. Mexican cave fish, having adapted to living in a completely dark environment over millions of years by losing their eyes, produce sighted offspring in a single generation. This is surprising to the writers of National Geographic magazine because they have the wrong starting point. The fish has not evolved, it has devolved. It is inferior to the original. The reason they have survived without eyesight is because if you live in a completely dark cave all your life, it does not actually matter and may even be an advantage since eyes are vulnerable to infection and damage. They assume millions of years for the speciation of the fish, but under the right conditions this can happen very quickly, even in a few decades. Blind fish and other creatures are born all the time, but they get eaten. What is significant about this story is that there were several isolated populations of cave fish. They were not mated with sighted fish, they were mated with each other, and in the first generation 48% of the offspring were sighted. From our information perspective, this is interesting but no surprise. Each isolated population quickly reinforces existing traits, but the cause of the blindness, due to loss of information, was different in each population. Each of the parents, in nearly half of the cases, had the genetic code that the other parent was missing, and so passed the missing code on to the offspring. The subject of global warming and the threat to polar bears seem to go together, and invariably the claim that polar bears have taken millions of years to evolve is made, presumably to increase their value. Polar bears are worthy creatures, I'm sure, but is this claim true or necessary? Do you need millions of years, or can polar bears be explained simply in terms of information loss and the environment? Polar bears and brown bears and black bears can all be mated successfully, which means producing fertile offspring. If animals can do this, then they are the same kind. So polar bears are the same kind as black bears. Here is a North American spirit bear. It's an albino black bear, and like our peacock earlier, it has lost the information for colour. There has been a copying mistake. Living in a forest, it's not going to help in his daily survival, being that conspicuous. Even if he does mate, the chances are that his partner is going to have the full colour information, and his white coat will not be preserved for future generations. As you go further north on the continent of America, the bears become lighter coloured, and there are even gold-coloured bears. Obviously, once you get to the Arctic zone, the situation is reversed, and being a black bear will be a disadvantage and being a white bear will be an advantage. Although dolphins and whales are considered to be separate genera, they are in fact the same kind. Variation has produced great diversity, but where mating between a whale and a dolphin is physically possible, fertile offspring are produced. At the Sea Life Park in Hawaii, a killer whale and a dolphin have mated, producing a wolphin called Kikeimalu. She has herself produced offspring, proof that whales and dolphins are the same kind, separated only by variation. There are other examples of seemingly distinct animal groups being able to breed and demonstrating that only variation separates them, such as the liger, produced by a male lion and a female tiger, and the kama, produced from a camel and a llama. To summarise, the genetic code always operates to conserve the code and does not allow change from one animal kind into another. There is no process whereby information is added. Adaptation is always a loss of information and produces variety. Animal life is never observed to produce anything other than the original kind. We know that animals adapt through variation, and this reminds me of a common linguistic sleight of hand used by proponents of evolution. It goes like this: animals change, evolution is change, and therefore all change is evolution. You have been warned. But do people really change over the ages? Before computers and central heating, some learned men believed that it would be possible to change base metals such as lead into precious metals such as gold. They were called alchemists. They devoted many years of their lives to this fruitless task. It's easy to laugh at them now, but in their day they were respected and admired for their learning and education. Richard Dawkins is best known for being an atheist and a geneticist. He says genetics proves evolution. He has written best-selling books about biology and religion and why there is no God. Many people respect his views. He says that if you don't believe in evolution, you are either stupid or wicked or both, and that it is the equivalent of being a Holocaust denier. He even argues that Hitler was a Christian. He does not like religious people, especially Christians. Of all people, wouldn't you expect Richard to be able to give us an example of information increase? This is essential to his worldview. He needs this for molecules to man evolution to be true.
Can you give an example of a genetic mutation or an evolutionary process which can be seen to increase the information in the genome?
Can you just stop when I think...
I'm recording.
Okay. There's a popular misunderstanding of evolution which says that fish turned into reptiles and reptiles turned into mammals, and so somehow we ought to be able to look around the world today and look at our ancestors. We ought to be able to see the intermediates between fish and reptiles, or between reptiles and mammals. We ought to be able to see fish kind of on the way to becoming reptiles. But of course that's not the way it is at all. Fish are modern animals. They're just as modern as we are. They're descended from ancestors, which we're descended from. Way back 300 million years ago, there would have been an ancestor, which was the ancestor of modern fish and the ancestor of modern humans. And that ancestor, if you could have been there then, you could have seen the first steps towards a fish, say, coming out onto the land and becoming something like an amphibian. But that was a long time ago. You wouldn't expect to see that today. And so quite a lot of the misunderstanding of evolution, I suppose, stems from the fact that people are looking at modern animals and thinking that Darwin has said we're descended from them. Well, we're not. We're not descended from modern fish. We're not descended from modern monkeys. We're not descended from modern apes. They are modern animals just as we are. They are our cousins. They're not our ancestors.
Richard was unable to answer the question by providing an example of a beneficial mutation. I didn't put the clip in to make anybody look foolish, but what is going on here? The next technology age is expected to be nanomachines and nanotechnology, complete machines so small you would need a microscope to see them, but at the present time it is still just a concept. But we have seen that they already exist, such as the flagellum motor, and Richard knows this better than most. If such devices cannot be made by the best minds in the best equipped laboratories today, why would anybody believe that the undirected forces of matter and energy could produce these machines? Evolutionary biology holds that at some time in the far distant past, a chemical soup managed to assemble itself into a living, reproducing organism. This is akin to believing that a tornado passing through a junkyard can somehow assemble a motor car. So what came first? Did an objective, impartial examination of the evidence lead Richard and many like him to discard the idea of a creator? Or did Richard want God out of his life and decided that he was justified in this by the scientific evidence? The letter to the Romans teaches that men do not choose to retain the knowledge of God, and in consequence God gives them up to a reprobate mind. A reprobate mind in this case does not mean that Richard himself is a reprobate, as we normally think of it. It means that he is unable to see the things of God in creation, and has been allowed to go his own way. What then are the possible origins of the genetic code? Was it designed by aliens? Considering the obvious design characteristics of the code, this isn't a bad answer. Richard sees design in nature and says that it is his job to explain it without a designer. He thinks that life may have been seeded here by aliens. This is quite a popular theory amongst evolutionary scientists and is called the panspermia theory. The problem with this, of course, is who then designed the aliens? Is it a product of chance? Statisticians say that there isn't enough matter in the universe to combine by chance to produce a single protein, let alone a life form. An undiscovered law of physics, always a possibility, but if there is one, we haven't found it yet. Designed by God, an omnipotent, all-knowing, creative entity. We have his scripture and the creation to guide us to the correct decision. Jesus said about the day of his return in Luke chapter 17 verse 24, "For just like the lightning, when it flashes out of one part of the sky, shines to the other part of the sky, so will the Son of Man be in his day." A white light, like lightning, will encompass the whole earth. There will be no darkness anywhere. At this point the discussion will be over, and it will be too late to change sides. The Bible does not teach a second chance or a rehabilitation program. Now is the day of grace. Thank you for watching this video.